easier it is to scale. The second issue is also related to the particular issue, the social problem you tackle. If it's, for example, providing cataract surgery to address the problem of needless blindness, that's something you can scale easily, because the cataract surgery you can do over and over and over again. It's very standardized. If it's really the solution, the intervention addressing a local problem, let's take a problem to integrate Roma population, that becomes very, very difficult also to scale from one Roma community in Romania to Hungary. So we have to be very, very careful, and we have to do our homework as researchers to understand what are actually the mechanisms that allow the intervention to actually achieve the desired outcome, and then have a more informed basis to scale. That's now a long answer to just one of the questions, but I thought I'd take the opportunity.
Okay, Shell, I'd like to just add something to that, which is much more conceptual. To me, when you ask about what's the relationship social enterprise and globalization, because you rightly point out, we talk about very localized, contextualized initiatives, and yet, so I really think that the whole phenomenon, and also some of the characteristics that have been pointed out about how they organize themselves, their collaborative approach, this idea. So first of all, I think they're more like a product of globalization. So the way they're very much they're very attuned to what globalization means on the ground. Yeah, so that's one thing. And then the way they respond to that, I think, can be usefully understood when you think about triple convergence. Yeah, so it was Thomas Friedman, I believe, who coined this term triple convergence when just characterizing globalization. Yeah, but I think when you look at the way social enterprises are active, they're very much responding to those trends which are coined triple convergence. So they're very much, for instance, horizontal convergence means distance no longer plays such a big role. You see that social entrepreneurs are incredibly well connected. They join networks, so you have Mauricio who's going to Quebec next week. There's a lot of movement across the world of social enterprise, which fits into that idea of functional convergence, geographical convergence. Sorry. Then this functional convergence, the fact that they combine different functions, is also something that has been pointed out in the research. The fact that they come up with integrative ideas that are complex, that combine different things. That's exactly the sort of thing that we would expect. That's exactly the trend that Thomas Friedman was talking about when characterizing globalization. And I think that's what we see on the ground as a sort of response to that. This kind of horizontal convergence, this idea of collaborating across different scales, is also something we've seen in the data. So we see that social entrepreneurs are very much open to collaborate with other social enterprises, with government, with non-profits. They contribute to processes of innovation led by mainstream businesses, but also by government. So thinking about globalization, I find it useful to think about those trends, those 6 types of convergence. Those 3 types of convergence: functional, geographical, and horizontal convergence. And I think along each of those types of convergence, you see an interesting response by social enterprises. So for me, social enterprises are really very much responsive to those trends, and you see that in the way they organize themselves.
Not exactly. Yes. It's a very interesting question you ask, and I'm going to give again very much an economist answer. So not, but I mean, globalization is driven by declining costs, private costs of transacting internationally, and as such, insofar as social enterprises have a commercial orientation at all, if costs of something fall, they'll do more of it. And so there's no real reason to think, and that's sort of what's been said in a different way. I mean, there's no reason to believe that they won't partake in trends towards globalization if they are, so to speak, profitable. I think that being said, most social enterprises are set up because the people involved in them think that there's a big difference between the private costs of activities and the social costs of activities. And actually, within the era of globalization, it is possible that the private sector very much understate the true costs of global trade and so forth. And as such, I mean, my feeling is that perhaps social entrepreneurs are going to be less, on average, less moving in the direction of globalization and more moving in the other direction because of their evaluation of the underlying costs, say, in terms of the environment, other such things. So it's just a reflection.
I really like this question because it comes back to something that was a hype about 10 years ago, and that was that you set up your own cluster or your biotech or your science park. Now we've moved on to clean tech parks and to windmill energy parks, and one of the reasons was a kind of a hidden agenda of policymakers was that, okay, if we put them in a cluster, in an incubator, then they won't leave us, they won't leave my city. And so there was a fear for globalization. But I think last week we had a discussion amongst a number of cities and policymakers about what you could do for clusters or kind of incubators for social enterprises, and how you could use them to address local social problems. You would start either from the business context, from a technology context with the living labs, or from you have a city which has a very deprived area and you want to bring in business and academia in. And there, maybe the public sector and also local customers are willing to pay a little bit extra for tailored services, for what you said, this niche market, and there is an opportunity for added value. But maybe you would also know more about it as doing an incubator.
From my view is that on the local global discussion is that a lot of social enterprises are a broker between these two scales, and they are very good, well in jumping these scales very tactically. They are very well, they're very knowledgeable to capture value out of the local. They can make money out of it. There are a few SMEs, business as usual, that are capturing that value. They're also in a town, but a social enterprise can really capture the value and monetize it, being in that town. And I think that's something we can learn a lot from social entrepreneurs towards for SMEs and so forth. But they are also very global because they are a product in many ways of globalization, and they translate many challenges, whether it's now global warming or poverty or social inclusion and so forth, very to the local level. And I think this broker role makes them really interesting actors for an innovation infrastructure at the European level. If you see the crisis we are facing now, the economic crisis, we could build around them a sort of innovation infrastructure for radical innovation in many societal areas. But I think it's really, it demands linking up even more, because we are talking about service innovation, and it's a lot about implicit knowledge and intangible knowledge. It is not about product innovation where you have a formula, or it's a lot about of exchange, physically exchange, but with a lot of interaction, and I think to build an infrastructure around it on European level could be really an engine for EU 2020.
Thank you. I would just have a few comments. I would like you to tell me what you think about them. Just about the competitiveness and social entrepreneurs, I have 2 points which are positive points. I would say, for me, what's important about social entrepreneurs and competitiveness is that they answer a need. There is a real pull factor. I think there is a real demand for ethics in businesses, and people want to consume differently. They want to use services which are much more social in the way they are provided. So there is a real demand. I think it's a growing demand as well, and they are the only ones who can answer this type of demand. So I think they feel a gap in the market which is growing and important. So I think in this, they help competitiveness to get enhanced. And the second thing I think is important is they turn beneficiaries into value creators. So for example, for the Cliana Foundation, you allow people to work, to participate in the economy, and before they could not. And I know there is a really good example in India called Aravind Eye Hospital, where they do eye surgery, and they help thousands of people to actually get involved in the economy after getting help. So they turn people who were basically marginalized into value creators. And I think this is very important for competitiveness. And the only problem I see is that I've seen a lot of social enterprise which are extremely innovative socially, but not at all in economic terms. I think what they do in economic terms is actually absolutely not optimal. They don't really know how to minimize cost, optimize, make everything work smoothly. So I think that's a negative point.
Does anyone want to reply to that? I think it's complementing some of what has been said. So, but would anyone like to react to that?
Only to comment that if you look at some of the work being done at the LSE by John Balmerino and Nick Bloom, what you just said about very wide variation in efficiency of firms applies not only to social entrepreneurs. I mean, if you simplifying somewhat, if you look at the difference between productivity in Indian firms and productivity in American firms, it's not that the range from the most efficient to the least efficient isn't very similar between them. It's just most Indian firms are terribly inefficient and most American firms are terribly efficient. But broadly the distributions. So I think it's not the fact that one observes inefficiencies in the set of social enterprises isn't really evidence that they're fundamentally different from conventional firms.
Okay, so my suggestion would be to skip to the third question in the interest of time. So the second question for those of you who are interested is, how is it, basically the SMEs is a sector which, so small and medium enterprises potentially could gain a lot from engaging in social innovation, and yet they seem to be difficult to get their acts together, let's say, and take action. So I was interested in the sort of panel's reflection on, what can be done about it. What is your views on the sort of potential for SMEs, mainstream SMEs, to engage in social innovation? You can discuss that in the reception. I'm now going to skip. So first of all, I want to sort of round up this first part, which I think was really useful. Thanks for the question, remarks. To kind of think about social enterprise, think about the competitiveness sector, competitiveness of the services sector in Europe, also in light of globalization, to get a very sort of grounded view of, from iPropeller's perspective, what kind of businesses would be interested in engaging with the know-how of social entrepreneurs, to get Sol's perspective on, what is it that social entrepreneurs can add, where can they bring that value, and it's really opening up our minds. It's not just about sort of specifically adding value to social enterprises specifically, but more to society as a whole, and that's incredibly fascinating, and that is very much in line also with what Bart was suggesting. Okay, so let me turn to the last question, which is very simply, with regards to social enterprises, I was interested to know, what kind of new policy measure would you suggest, or a modification of an existing policy, which would really enable the growth and development of social enterprises in Europe?
Yeah, because now I want to be first, because I want to hear what Sol is going to say later on. Policy, it might be a surprise given what I've said before, but I'm in the end a strong believer in free market dynamics. and I'm coming from an economical department, maybe one of the few economical guys in the room. But despite that, so I'm not going to say we need more public money to put into funds to support social